Hello everyone, this is something I wanted to just go through for a few minutes. It's a new initiative I've started, which I don't know if you'll want to be involved in. So I'm looking for some support in this initiative, which is that I've decided to take some of the evidence that's been put into the public domain over the last few months and send it to various agencies in the UK because I think there's evidence of fraud, medical malpractice, acts of domestic terrorism and breaches of human rights, all to do with the COVID-19 scam. So what I've got here in this posting, if you go to the website here, CV Pandemic Investigation, and I'll put links in the description, I've got some instructions here, and basically what I've done is I've written another report, a bit like the one I did earlier in the year, although this has a different emphasis, and you can click on this link here, which is called Evidence of Fraud, Medical Malpractice, Acts of Domestic Terrorism, etc. Click on that, and then within the report, when it loads up, if you scroll down, you'll see obviously the title page, and what I'm hoping for is to get some people to sign this report, kind of like a petition, but a petition with a report, not just a petition. In other words, it's a sort of power petition, if you will, with saying, why it needs to be looked at. So if you scroll down here into this sort of pinky purple background section here, you can then put in your name and address, and you can put in your qualifications, for example, and then say whether you want to have these details shown online or not, and then you can sign this here, and this will then obviously give me some support that I'm going to, when I send this out, which will be on the 12th of September, I intend to send this out to various agencies, and these agencies, for example, are UK agencies. Serious Fraud Office, I'm going to send it to. I'm going to send it to NHS Improvement, Healthcare UK, which is kind of a watchdog body, National Crime Agency, and so forth. So I'm going to send it to all of these. I'm going to send it in paper and by email, and if anybody knows of any other UK agencies that they think I should send it to and they've got contact details, then please do advise me. So I'm going to send it to those, and basically just to give you a quick run through of what it is, I'll go to the contents page, basically scroll back up here a bit. So I've got an introduction, a bit of background. Then basically what I've done is compiled evidence of fraud, where I'm talking about isolation of the virus, because what's triggered this off essentially is that I wrote to Public Health England around about 20th of July, 24th of July, I've got the date here, and I asked them to provide evidence of the isolation of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the one that is allegedly causes the disease COVID-19. And I wanted direct evidence, not a PCR test, which only detects an alleged gene sequence, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute, and this has been covered very well by Dr. Andrew Kaufman. So they basically responded and said that they don't have any evidence of isolation of this virus, they don't have any evidence that it causes COVID-19. So basically this really to me is fraud on its face, in that they have admitted they don't have any evidence for the cause of this alleged pandemic. So it's all basically hearsay. Obviously I'm exaggerating slightly, but the rest of it is all based on this PCR test. So I go through some of the stuff about the PCR test and why it doesn't work, and like for example the inventor of the test said it should never be used for clinical diagnosis, it's just a research tool. This is confirmed in various studies. And then I've included the evidence that recently came to light through, actually it came to light in April, but it's been done the rounds again recently, where one particular PCR testing protocol, and it is only one particular one, matches human chromosome 8, or at least part of it does, so there's a risk that could trigger a false positive. It's a small risk, but there it is. And so I basically go through why I think there's been fraud, and also point out that it was classified as a not high consequence disease, and this was by the ACDP committee, the Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens, and somebody sent me this letter from Professor Tom Evans, which was sent to Public Health England on the 13th of March, and then the government ignored that and set up all the lockdown measures. Fraudulent death figures, which I covered in the earlier report, and that's sort of reproduced from the earlier report that I did. And the conflicts of interest, that's also from the earlier report. But then this is new. I look at acts of domestic terrorism, and I look at the UK Terrorism Act, and I make the case that the government, or SAGE, they have actually committed acts of domestic terrorism because of the documents that they've published. Like, for example, they're talking about a perceived threat. Substantial number of people do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. It could be that they are reassured by the low death rate in their demographic group. So that right there to me says that they know that this isn't a dangerous virus, yet they want to, it says here, the perceived level of personal threat needs to be increased among those who are complacent. That's in one of their own documents. To me, that is domestic terrorism, if you ask me. And this is something that was highlighted a few months back by the UK Column News and Brian Gerrish and Mike Robinson, but I've just put it into a more sort of formalised document here, you might say. And there's a table in this document where they talk about other things such as use the media to increase sense of personal threat, consider enacting legislation to compel required behaviours, and consider the use of social disapproval for failure to comply. So, and then I look at the media campaigns of public intimidation, which is what I've called them, where in the UK we had these, all the daily newspapers had this message on the front here saying stay at home, and then later we had stay alert. So who paid for these? Who paid for these adverts? And I asked the question, if the government paid for these adverts, then are the British print media and the beneficiaries of their payments ever going to question this flawed and fake and fraudulent COVID-19 narrative? I think it's easy to determine the answer to that question. And then I talk about the Cressida Dick incitement to shaming, discriminating against disabled people essentially. And then, for example, the threat that they can destroy buildings. Councils can destroy buildings based on this so-called second wave threat, or high incidence of a number of cases. I mean, it's just totally crazy. And this legislation says they can do this. They can close premises, not so much knock down the buildings, but they can close premises without a magistrate's order. They can just go in and do it. So people can just be harassed over this, and I think this is domestic terrorism. And then, of course, some people have raised human rights violations, and I go into a bit more detail about that here and how the measures, break the articles of the Human Rights Declaration, which is, of course, ironically, a UN document, and of course the World Health Organization is associated with the WHO, so associated with the UN, I should say. So, it's all pretty crazy. And then this idea that people are assumed infectious until proven otherwise. If they get a positive result, they have to self-isolate and all this nonsense. It's just ridiculous. This is a contravention of human rights, and I liken this to the innocent until proven guilty, and now it's guilty until proven innocent, or infectious until proven otherwise. It's just crazy. You can restrict people's freedoms. You can interfere with them. You can interfere with their lives. Crazy. This has got to stop. So these are human rights violations, and they've got to stop. And then I go into how I think that healthcare related laws have been broken, such as the Health and Social Care Act 2012 in the UK, which talks about when they change health procedures, so forth, things that are going to affect public health, they need to do an impact assessment. And this, to my knowledge, was never done. They just said, we're in so much danger, we're just going to do it. We're going to close the, hospital services, and we're going to close this, we're going to close that. And there was no impact assessment. Similarly, for the implementation of the use of masks, the mandate for masks, I don't think they did, an impact assessment of that. So that's illegal under the Health and Social Care Act. And I put in some of the studies about masks which says they don't work, and they can even be harmful to health. And then huge medical malpractice because they're not using hydroxychloroquine, which has been proven to work for COVID-19 victims, or respiratory disease basically is what this is helpful for, because it seems to affect how oxygen gets into the cells in the lungs and so forth, and that's why the HCQ treatment seems to be effective. So I go through that, so that's all in there, and references to papers. And then we've got this ridiculous situation with hospitals being half empty and stuff like that. And then I finish with going through in a table which crimes or offences or both I think which people should be charged with, and I can probably make this a much longer list, but there's an example. So I've put all the links in there as I always try and do, and summary. So if you want to put your name to this report then and share it with others and get them to put their name to it if they agree with my approach, then obviously when I send this off, if it's got like 100 signatures on it or something, and preferably you can put your qualifications, you can put where you live. It's primarily for UK people. I suppose it doesn't have to be, but it's going to be better because it's very much focused on UK laws. And of course, if anybody wants to use this in their own country, and they want to try a similar approach and look at what agencies they could approach to look at this. Certainly I came to this partly from looking at this page, which is, for example, got various whistleblower email addresses that you can use for like food standards, qualities and human rights, environment and stuff like that. And you might find a similar page on your own government's website. Again, we're dealing with the government, aren't we? And this is all government kind of led. So again, maybe I'm wasting my time. I'm not so naive as to think that this is going to have any massive effect. But it's making a statement. I'm not asking for any money. I'm not employing expensive lawyers. Maybe if there is a lawyer listening to this and they want to take up the case and do it in their own way, absolutely fine. You can take this report, pull it apart, take the bits from it. I really don't mind what you do, as long as we are holding these people to account for these terrible abuses that have been thrust upon us, and the freedoms that have been stripped away, and what they're trying to get away with. And obviously that's my objective, is to try and prevent that from going any further than it has now, and it has gone too far. People that have seen this young woman in Australia who was pregnant being arrested for incitement. I put that right at the end of the report. Just put a link in there because I'd literally seen that video just as I was finalising this report. So, if you want to be arrested in your pyjamas when pregnant, having recently made a Facebook post, then don't do anything. They'll come and arrest you, for protesting this. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say for now. So I hope that you find that of some use in your own campaigning or whatever, or your own information networks. Please share, and I'd appreciate your support if you have the time to give it. So thank you very much, and bye for now.